My wife and I were married for 6 years when we started going to a new church. It took us a while to find one we didn't feel uncomfortable at. After the first service, the pastor gave us each contact cards to fill out, and as I watched my wife interact with him, I felt like I was watching two people instantly become fascinated with each other. Even though I was standing there and the pastor mentioned his wife, they still seemed enthralled by the other. I finally broke up the conversation by reminding my wife I had to get home to watch the Eagles play. During the game, I noticed her texting someone a lot. That was the first sign. That night, I finally asked who she was messaging, and she said it was a woman from church that she exchanged numbers with while I was getting coffee. I did remember her talking to a woman while I poured myself coffee, so I believed her lie. But that night, she wasn't very eager to have sex, and her phone kept buzzing as we did it. The next few days, there was no sex or phone buzzing. I glanced at her screen and noticed a little moon symbol in the corner. So I knew she put her phone on silent. I saw a text from a woman's name, but it didn't make sense, and at the time, I didn't think she was doing anything more than texting a new friend too much. Well, she refused to talk about why she didn't want to have sex anymore, and I didn't faze her one bit. She was always holding her phone, even as she made dinner or laid in bed. She started picking fights with me when I'd ask her to put the phone down, which seemed to give her more of a reason to ignore me and stay on her phone, since according to her, we weren't getting along anymore. She told me she was signing up for a night class at the church every Thursday. This was when we hadn't done anything together for a month and a half, so I was angry and irritable. I asked if I could go with her, and she said it was a women's only thing. I started to wonder if she was starting an affair with a woman, but I did remember her interaction with the pastor on the same day her phone started buzzing. So I followed her on the first night. I knew her going anywhere without me after all our abstinence was a really bad sign. She actually drove to the church, so I drove past the entrance, feeling a little delusional. But when I turned around and drove by again, I noticed there were only 2 cars in the parking lot. I entered the parking lot and parked far away. I didn't know what was going on, but I was about to find out. The side door where the cars were parked was unlocked. I went inside, and all I had to do was follow the sounds. I started recording with my phone in shaky hands. My heart was going crazy because I knew my wife was here, and I was hearing sounds I'd never hear in a church ever again. I came to a closed door, but all I had to do was open it, and I saw them on a mattress on the floor. I recorded them frantically getting dressed while I yelled at them, calling them names and demanding they explain themselves. But I didn't really give them a chance to talk because I didn't want to hear what they had to say. I couldn't stay a moment longer, so I ran out of the church as my wife called after me. I drove home and locked my wife out of the house with additional locks. I sat wide awake in the dark living room, waiting to see if she'd try to come home. She did, around 3 a.m. But when she realized she couldn't get in, she just got back in her car and left. I knew she couldn't stay at the pastor's house since he was married, but she would probably sleep in the church. I pictured the pastor freaking out over the very real possibility of him losing his entire livelihood and family. Just then, he tried to call me. Of course, I wouldn't answer it, but he left me a very interesting voicemail. He said if I would consider keeping his name out of this situation, he would make it worth my while. I couldn't believe he was offering me a bribe. What a good example this man was. I had proof. I lied and told him I would keep his name out of it if he let me address the congregation to tell them about my wife's infidelity. I wanted to make sure she would never set foot in that church again. He agreed happily. That Sunday, as far as I know, my wife had been sleeping on the affair mattress in the church for 2 nights. She tried calling and texting me, but we didn't see each other until Sunday morning when she was wearing the same clothes as Thursday and didn't appear to be enjoying herself. She looked nervous and sick when I refused to sit with her or talk, and when I was called up by the pastor to speak, I thought she would pass out. The pastor was sweating, but he had no choice. Either I was going to destroy his life or take his bribe. He had to trust me, and just like he broke my trust, I was going to break his. I got right to the point and said I had proof my wife was having an affair with the pastor of this church. The collective gasp was so intense, my hair moved. The pastor didn't know what to do. He just froze in place, dripping sweat. People looked to him for an answer or objection, but he knew I recorded it, so he would be a fool to deny it. He excused himself as the congregation got louder, including the vocal objections and cries from his wife. She wailed as I left, past my soon-to-be ex, and out the front door of the church. Before I got far, I heard her yell at my wife, amongst other commotions. Neither of us went to that church again. Actually, no one did, because AP was divorced and lost all respect and credibility. The exposure and divorce went as well as it could for me, so I couldn't be happier. I've since started dating again and feel confident I'll find someone worthwhile. I've noticed my life happening in chapters, so when a change occurs, it doesn't take away my motivation to keep moving forward. OP, I am so proud of you for how you handled this and investigated the clues in your wife's behavior. You were so smart to start recording in this time of extreme stress because it helped expose them, even if you didn't have to show anyone. AP was a complete idiot to believe he could get away with stealing your wife and keeping it a secret. He brought her to the church itself, literally inviting this affair to come to light. Your wife was a sleazy, untrustworthy woman who fed into a feeling she got when she met the pastor. A feeling that any married woman would dismiss because of her love and loyalty for her husband. We all encounter temptation somewhere in life, and to give into that is to give into animalistic desires that simply do not benefit anyone's mind. It's in human nature and our own well-being to pair with a romantic partner for life, and ideally never experience anything but loyalty and a sacred partnership. Thank you for sharing your story, OP. Your wife and AP got what was coming to them, and I knew you'd have no problem moving forward in life. Now let's get into our second story for today. My girlfriend and I were dating for a year before moving in together. I proposed before our 2-year anniversary because I was in love. We got along so well, and I never grew tired of her presence. We both worked out together, but there were several times a month when she'd go to the gym without me because of my work. She met another man there, and 4 days after our wedding, she said she was leaving me for him. I didn't even know there was someone else until she told me. I let her go because it was the most dignified thing I could do. A few of my family members supported me through this by talking on the phone or having me over for a while. Word got around at work that I needed a place to stay, so the one guy looking to rent out a room in his house felt kinda pressured to rent to me. The relationship was pretty awkward, but at least I had a place to survive. I was able to save up and find my own place 1 year later. I hadn't heard anything from my ex, and I was just starting to date again. I found a girl I liked well enough to have a 4th date with, and it was on that date that my ex called me. I hadn't heard her voice in so long, I couldn't resist the temptation to answer the phone. I left for the bathroom quickly and answered in a breathless voice. She was crying, and just like in all the dreams I had about her, she asked me to take her back now. I couldn't believe it was happening just like I expected it would. She said she found out AP was cheating on her, but even before that, she regretted her decision to give up her marriage. It was the most foolish and impulsive thing she could have done for a man she met at the gym. I told her I'd call her later, but I wasn't sure if I would. I rejoined my date and felt weird the whole time. I just knew my ex wasn't going to drop out of my life now that she wanted me back. I never told her family or friends what she did to me. It was like the consequences of her breaking my heart never happened. It was up to me now to take her back or not, and I relished the chance to tell her no. I called her back later that night and told her she could take a hike because her betrayal really got to me, and I would be a fool to let her do it to me again. She freaked out and said she really needed a place to stay, but I stood my ground until I just hung up on her. Her apologies and sweet voice didn't sway me, and I slept soundly. Then I heard a commotion in my living room at 2:30 a.m. It was my ex climbing through the open window. I thought I was dreaming. I asked her what the hell she thought she was doing, and she laughed a little. She looked at me with puppy dog eyes and said she needed me, now more than ever, to forgive her so we could start over new. She said she could really show me the life we intended to have when we got married. She admitted she was a foolish woman that didn't deserve me based on her record, but she was asking to be given the chance to repay me for forgiving her now. I burst out laughing in her face. I pointed at her and said she deserved every bit of what she had coming to her. I promised her my life, and she mocked me for it by divorcing me 4 days later. She would never get another chance or help from me, and if I could have it my way, she wouldn't get anyone else's help. She was in disbelief that I was being so cruel to her. She never got to see this side of me. She started sobbing and told me if I didn't let her move back in, she would be homeless with nowhere to go because AP kicked her out. Out of curiosity, I asked why, and she said it was because he conceived a baby with another woman, so he kicked her out to let them move in. I just laughed and told her she deserved this, and if she didn't get out of my place and face her consequences, I'd call the police. She proceeded to cry, standing or sitting in my front yard until around 7:30 am, when neighbors started coming out and going to work. They looked at her funny enough to scare her away. Without AP, she tried to return to her family in her greatest time of need. It worked for about 1 week, but then I made my round of delayed phone calls. I told each of her family members what ended our marriage so suddenly, and updated them on the recent situation she found herself in. I asked them to discourage her from trying to get in contact with me or anyone else until she took some time to find herself. Well, my calls worked like a charm, and her family responded either by refusing to help her or keeping tabs on her like a nosy parent. She didn't have financial assistance or trust, which is the least she had coming. She was also forced to experience the heartbreak she was so willing to dish out. OP, I am so sorry your wife left you for a stranger at the gym. I admire your strength and perseverance to go on living your life. It's so good to hear that she finally had to endure the same pain and betrayal she gave you. Honestly, what could she expect, knowing she left you for this man? It only makes sense that she wouldn't be able to live happily ever after. The guilt should have eaten her alive, and when that fails, history repeats. She was left by a cheater, made to feel exactly how she made you feel. You did a great job of resisting her manipulative apology. Always put yourself and the future you see for yourself ahead of anyone else. And remember that any successful and healthy relationship has consistently open communication about any and all feelings. It's the only way to maintain happiness and love. Remember to receive any criticism or requests with an open heart while maintaining your own boundaries of self-respect. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. Take care.